The whimper was faint, a thin, trembling sound carried on the wind from the direction of the old, abandoned garage. It was a sound of fear, a sound of pleading. I stood perfectly still, my ears perked forward, my black and tan fur bristling against the chill. The smell of dust and rust hung in the air, mingled with a sharper scent I knew all too well, the heavy, musky odor of Rex, the big, scarred mongrel who ruled this territory. And beneath it all, the distinct, floral scent of Lily, the beautiful, long-haired Persian cat who had arrived in our neighborhood a few weeks ago. My legs were stiff, my paws planted on the cold concrete path. The muscles in my haunches twitched, a primal instinct screaming at me to run, to do what I had done before. But I didn't move. The memory hit me like a wave of ice water, flooding my senses. I remembered the sprint, the feeling of my teeth sinking into Rex's flank, the roar of anger as I threw myself between him and Lily. I remembered the look in her wide, green eyes, gratitude, terror. I remembered the warmth of the old man's hand on my head that night, praising me for being a good boy, a protector. And I remembered the next day. I remembered the way Lily's cry had turned from a plea for help into a sharp, accusing yelp, her paw pointing at me as she limped before the gathered animals of the neighborhood. I remembered the way the squirrels had chattered in disgust, how the birds had flown away, spreading the story. I remembered old Tom, the wise border collie, looking at me with disappointment in his weary eyes, a liar, a brute, a creature to be shunned. I remembered the day the old man had to take me to the place with the strange smells and the long, cold tables. I remembered the look in his eyes, not anger, but a deep, crushing sadness as the men in white coats took me away. They said I was a danger. They said I was unstable. I remembered the final, cold feeling of loneliness as the world faded to black. The whimper came again, sharper this time, laced with a new note of pain. I should go in there. I should help her. The thought was a ghost, a remnant of the dog I had been. I slowly turned my head, my muzzle directed towards the garage. I could hear the scuffle inside, the scraping of claws on concrete, a low, triumphant growl from Rex. Then, I turned my back, and I didn't walk, I didn't run, and I simply, calmly began to walk away, my gait steady, my tail low and still. The sound of her distress grew fainter as I moved through the alley and back out into the open park. I was different now, and I had been given another chance, a strange and confusing second life. I had woken up in the old man's house, healthy and whole, with the memory of that betrayal seared into my soul like a brand. I saw the old man now, sitting on our porch, his favorite wooden pipe in his hand. He smiled when he saw me. "There's my boy, Arlo," he said, his voice a warm, gravelly rumble. I trotted up the steps and placed my head on his knee, the simple act grounding me, reminding me what was real, what I had to protect. Behind me, in the park, I could hear the first murmurs. A pair of blue jays were already on a branch, their heads cocked, their beaks chattering. "Did you see? Arlo just walked away from the garage." Lily was in there. Rex was with her. Where was Arlo going? I pressed my head harder against the old man's knee. They would talk. The story would spread. And soon, just like last time, the accusations would come. The next morning, the sun was pale and weak. I was lying on the porch when I sensed the change in the air, a gathering. I lifted my head. The entire neighborhood had assembled. The fat squirrel who lived in the oak tree, the territorial robin, a few of the stray cats who kept to themselves, and in the center, limping dramatically, was Lily. Her pristine white fur was matted, a few clumps missing. Her eyes were huge and watery. She was a picture of tragic beauty, and she was crying. "It was him," she wailed, her delicate paw pointing directly at me. "Arlo, he attacked me." All eyes turned to me. The squirrels froze. The birds stopped chirping. A heavy silence descended. I stood up slowly. My heart was pounding, a deep, rhythmic thud against my ribs, but I forced myself to remain calm. I had lived this nightmare once. I was not going to live it again. I didn't snarl, and I didn't bark defensively. Instead, I let out a single, low woof, a sound that wasn't aggressive, but demanding attention. Then, I turned and trotted a few paces away. I paused, looking back at the crowd, and let out another woof. I was leading. The animals watched, confused. Old Tom stepped forward. He was a grizzled old dog, his muzzle flecked with gray, his eyes holding the wisdom of 100 seasons. "Follow him," he said, his voice quiet but commanding. "We will hear his side." Lily's cry stopped for a moment. Confusion flickered in her eyes. "Don't go. He is a liar. He will hurt you too." But the crowd, led by old Tom, began to follow me. I led them not to the garage, but to the old, gnarled oak tree at the edge of the park. This was neutral ground. Rex's scent was weaker here. I began to dig. I had done it last night when the neighborhood was still. I had been here, frantically digging, burying something I'd found. I dug quickly, sending clods of dirt flying, and finally, my teeth closed on the familiar, leathery texture. I pulled it out and dropped it at old Tom's feet. It was Rex's old, worn leather collar, the one he'd lost a week ago. It was covered in a smell, and tangled in the thick leather strap was a long, white tuft of fur, Lily's fur. Old Tom sniffed it carefully. He looked from the collar to Lily. The silence in the clearing was now heavy with doubt. The squirrel's chattering ceased. The robin tilted its head. Just then, a low, menacing growl rumbled from the shadows. Rex had arrived. The big mongrel stepped into the clearing, his massive head lowered, his teeth bared. He saw the collar, and his growl deepened into a snarl. He stalked forward, pushing past the smaller animals, his whole body a threat. He planted himself between me and Lily. Arlo planted that. Lily shrieked, her voice frantic and high. He stole Rex's collar. He is working with Rex. They are both monsters. I watched the scene unfold with a cold clarity. Lily had shifted her accusation. IT was a brilliant, stupid move. Rex, the true bully, was now her supposed protector. The smaller animals shrank away from Rex's obvious aggression. The story, in their eyes, was rewriting itself. I was now the ally of a monster. Arlo, old Tom said, his voice heavy with sadness. You must leave. You are a disruption to our community. I felt the familiar sting of rejection, a sharp, physical ache in my chest. I looked at old Tom. I wanted to howl in frustration, but I had no words. I simply turned and walked away. Not in shame, but in purpose. I had to protect my home now. My old man. I didn't go far. I was not some wandering outcast. I sat on the porch of the old man's house, a silent sentinel. The old man could feel my tension. He would come out, scratch my ears, and ask, "What is it, boy? What's wrong?" I couldn't tell him. I could only watch. Days passed. I saw the neighborhood turn cold. The birds would fly high over my head. The squirrels would screech a warning when I approached. I saw the old man's confusion when other neighbors looked at me with suspicion. I saw him begin to worry. Why is everyone acting so strange? He'd mutter. Lily was emboldened. She strutted around with Rex, her small form cozying up to his brutish strength. She was using him, and he was a willing pawn. But he was a fool. He was strong, but not clever. I started my campaign. IT was settled. I began leaving objects on the porch. A bone I found in the park, chewed in a very specific way that resembled the marks on the toys Lily claimed I had destroyed. I left a scrap of a red collar that I'd seen Rex wearing before. And then, I began my nightly walks. I would stand at the edge of the old man's property line and stare at the abandoned garage. I would bark, just single, insistent bark, not all night, just a few times. Just enough to be noticed. One evening, the old man, grumbling, put on his heavy coat and took his flashlight. "All right, you crazy mutt. What's got you so worked up?" He followed me across the park, his light casting a beam of yellow in the darkness. I led him right to the garage. The door was ajar. IT smelled strongly of Rex and of fear. There was a pile of discarded, torn cat toys and some dog bones. The old man shined his light inside. His face was a mask of disgust and understanding. "So that's it," he whispered. "The troublemaker." The next day, the men from the city came. They set a trap. Rex was caught. He wasn't killed, just taken away, howling and snarling, to a place he wouldn't be able to trouble anyone for a very long time. Without Rex, Lily's world collapsed. The protection he offered was gone. She tried to put on her innocent face again, to look beautiful and wounded, but the community was no longer listening. The evidence I'd left had done its work, and old Tom was now speaking in a low, knowing voice to the other animals. It was Rex all along. Arlo was trying to warn us. And then I made my final move. I returned to the oak tree. I hadn't just buried Rex's collar. I had also buried a piece of a plastic tag I'd found in Rex's old bed, a tag that had a number on it that I often saw the old man looking at on the phone. But the most important piece was still there. The final, undeniable piece. IT was an old, shredded bird toy, dyed a brilliant blue. IT was Lily's. It was one of the first things she claimed went missing after her first encounter with Rex. I had found it in his nest the day before I was first attacked. I trotted back to the gathered community. Old Tom was there. The birds were perched, listening. Lily was trying to get away, but a few of the older cats blocked her path. I dropped the toy in front of old Tom. He sniffed it. The scent of Lily was all over it, and mixed in with the stuffing was a long, white, matted hair. "This is a toy from the house where Lily used to stay," old Tom said, his voice sharp as a winter's wind. "She told the humans the big dogs had stolen it." Lily's face twisted. The mask of innocence was gone, replaced by a cold fury. "You think you're so clever," she hissed, and her voice was no longer a delicate plea, but a sharp, venomous rasp. "I was only protecting myself. I need to survive. Who cares about the dumb mutt you all worship?" The confession hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Old Tom looked at her. His gaze was not angry, just profoundly disappointed. "You are a danger to this community, Lily, not a victim. You used Rex's fear against us, and you tried to destroy Arlo, who is a dog of real honor. You must leave." Lily stood, trembling with her rage. She could no longer hide. She was cast out, shunned. All the splendor, the game, the lies, had finally come undone. She was more alone than she'd ever been, and the price of her survival was a life of solitude. After she had vanished, a squirrel called out, "But the old man will never know the truth. He'll never know what Arlo did." All eyes turned to me. I felt a deep weariness. I had done it. I had won. But I was so tired. I padded back home. I was exhausted. I climbed the porch steps and laid down. The old man was sitting on the porch, his face etched with worry. He reached out and stroked my head. His hand was shaking just a little. "It's okay, boy," he said softly. "The troublemakers are gone. It's just me and you now." And in that moment, I knew he didn't need to know the details. The squirrels chattering didn't matter. The bird's song didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was his hand on my head. I let out a small, contented sigh and licked his fingers. I had remembered a life of betrayal and loss, and I had used that memory not for revenge, but to protect the only thing that truly mattered. The world was safe again, and my home was safe. It was enough.